Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Kris Roberts. And today we're going to get a little feisty. We're going to do our best to bust up some myths, even hurt some people's feelings. Why? Okay. First, I was reading an editorial yesterday. In an editorial, it stated that the United States had set its bar so low to be president of the United States that you needed a shovel to dig down to it. And I thought that was really kind of harsh. Maybe truthful, but it was kind of harsh. You know what? Since President Biden put his little hand on the paper saying that he wasn't going to run for president. Who is President Biden? Where is President Biden? Is he just going to sit in the White House or sit in Delaware and do nothing until January 20th when we have a new president sworn in? But the part that really gets me is the amount of lies that are being told by both sides. I'm going, Trump can't tell the truth. J.D. Vance doesn't like Donald Trump. Saw all the defects of character in Donald Trump. But when he got a chance to run for vice president, he can overlook that. So, total hypocrisy and something that we wouldn't expect out of a Marine, but it happens. The vice president, there's no doubt in my mind she and the cohorts stabbed President Biden in the back. It was a gigantic, a great Machiavellian move. You know, Machiavellian. Joe Biden took Kamala Harris from basically being a nobody, just a senator, that really had no political future of a moving up. He goes in and says, you know what? I'm going to make a black woman, pick a black woman to be my vice president. See? Well, he boxed himself in. And so when he boxed himself in, he decided, well, you know what? I'm going to get someone of weak character, weak ability, who can just sit there and not really do nothing and sit there and not threaten me. Joe Biden, you made a classic mistake. Classic. If you read The Art of War, you read The Five Rings, you read Machiavelli the Prince, you did everything wrong, and basically you were overthrown. The guy from Walt, I can't remember his, WALZ, Kamala Harris is vice president. candidate. Okay, everybody's talking about stolen valor and all this other kind of stuff. Okay. When you get promoted in the military, when you get to be senior staff NCOs and you get to be officers, like for example, that may say, okay, Lieutenant Colonel Roberts, we're promoting you to colonel. If I'm going to take those colonel eagles, I have to make a commitment to stay in the service for 3 more years. If I decide to retire a year and a half, I will not retire as a colonel. I will retire as a lieutenant colonel. Plain and simple. So what it appears, he may have had the billet of command sergeant major. I don't know the Army's right off the bat. So he could be command sergeant major. But in the Army, and especially in the reserves, National Guard, when I was in the Marine Corps, I had a number of reserve units that are responsible in their requirements. You got selected and you were appointed command master sergeant or whatever it is, command sergeant major. But to keep those, you have to go to school or you have to complete the course online. Well, he didn't go to school and he didn't complete the course, so he retired. And because he did not make those qualifications, he could not retire as a command sergeant major. He had to give up that rank and retire at the previous rank. So if he got selected to E9, he failed to meet the requirements, and so when he retired, he would retire at E8. Okay, so that becomes a technicality. Okay, if I'm in the room as a lieutenant colonel, I would properly get addressed as Colonel Roberts. But if there was a colonel in the room, I would get addressed as Lieutenant Colonel Roberts. So, depending on the situation, I would be addressed as Colonel Roberts. Another way, I may be addressed as Lieutenant Colonel Roberts. So that becomes ticky-tack. Okay. Hey, he's playing the game. As far about not deploying, when we got ready to go to the first Gulf War, my job was to make the load plans and load up all the aircraft. Matter of fact, I still have all those load plans and the aircraft back from 1990. And my orders by my boss, the colonel, who was a lieutenant colonel, but I call him colonel, was to make sure everybody went, all the equipment went, and I was the last person on the plane. A number of officers, Marine officers, a number of Marine senior staff NCOs found ways not to go. I thought it was disgusting, but these individuals, they found loopholes, and they used their loopholes not to go in harm's way. There's people, officers and senior staff enlisted, do it all the time. They didn't go UA, they didn't desert, they found ways not to have to deploy. Okay? That was one of, you know what did he do? He resigned or he retired, okay? If he runs for Congress, there is no reason to have to retire from the reserves if you're a member of Congress, okay? He so choose to retire, so he said he was running for Congress. You know, he said he retired a couple of months prior to knowing. Well, that would be a stretch because you know in advance it's more than a few months notice. Okay? But he did it the legal ways, and so as long as he's not wearing a rank that he doesn't, as long as he's not going out and saying, I'm an E9, or going to functions as an E9, as long as he's not wearing ribbons and badges he doesn't rate, he wouldn't fall under the stolen valor thing. Okay? All four of these people have very serious defects. I question all four of their leadership abilities and the abilities to have independent people on their staffs, not yes people. I think whoever wins is going to be filled with yes people who like to do their first 2 years to get credit for having a government job and going out to work in private business to make a lot of money. But you know what? Which is even more insulting, I find. All four of them are saying we're working for the middle class. We want to do tax cuts for the middle class. We want to do benefits for the middle class. We want to ensure that no one making less than $400,000 a year, whether it's individual, I think it's a lower number individual, but a household making $400,000 a year doesn't have to pay more taxes. But you know what? Ask either one of them, or ask either one of their tagalongs, their parrots, what is middle class to you? Okay? Almost everybody, when I'm looking at the thing, where'd I put it? There is no official standard for what constitutes middle class. For most, it's more about a standard of living, including owning a house, being able to afford to pay for a college education for your kids, and having enough disposable income to take a family vacation. By that standard, the majority of Americans are not middle class. We like to say Americans are middle class. You know why? Because we want to dumb down standards. Because advertisers and companies know if you can get people to believe they're middle class, they'll spend because they figure this is what middle class people are supposed to have. It doesn't matter if they have the money or not. But so I can go in, if I'm a politician, I say, hey, you're middle class. Because we all want to feel good. We all want the trophy. So by lowering the standards, we're not hurting anybody's feelings. You're middle class. You're middle class. your middle class. Okay? According to the Federal Reserve, you know what middle class household is in New Hampshire? Okay. Right here at the bottom of middle class is $59,989 adjusted gross income. Okay? But wait a minute. On the other end of middle class is $179,984. Wait. So in New Hampshire, 60,000 makes you middle class. 180,000 makes you middle class. If I have 3 times as much money as the person at this bottom, you know what? That's statistical manipulation. It's political manipulation. It's advertising manipulation. Okay? When I ran the Boston Marathon, I did 2 hours and 30 minutes, finished 317th place. I did another one. I did 2 hours and 30 minutes and finished, I think it was 153rd place. Okay? But you had standards. Okay, if you're under 40, you had to run 250 or faster. And as soon as the clock became 4 hours, or Johnny Kelly active, or it continued until Johnny Kelly, who had won 2 marathons, finished, that was it. The clock was turned off. The top 400 guys, the top 50 women, they were picked up, they were brought in, space blanket went on, they got their feet taken care of, they were fed the soup, the whole works. But you only had a couple of thousand people running it because it was one of the top-notch races. You know, you wanted to run in Boston, you wanted to run in Yokohama, can't you pronounce the word, in Japan, the Olympic marathon, some of those things. But you know, we're going to make people feel better, so the Boston Marathon has 25,000 people. Oh, yes. It does. You know, for you guys under 40, we're going to give you a half a minute a mile more, so you got to do 3:05 to qualify. So all these people go and say, I ran the Boston Marathon. No, for a lot of years, you jogged the Boston Marathon. You would not qualify for the Boston Marathon under the 1970, 1980 standards. So people from Boston run the Boston Marathon says, hey, you know, we put 20,000 more people in, we can make a lot of money. The people at Boston hotels say, this is really great. We can have all these people, we'll make a lot of money. So when you look at things around the country, we just keep lowering the standards to keep people happy. To think makes people feel like they accomplish stuff. You know, when I played Babe Ruth baseball, 4 teams, 15 each, same thing with Little League. They didn't care if you were the 61st player. It was tough luck so bad, try harder and try to crack the top 60 next year, or hope someone quits and then you can move in. So we make it easier and easier. And what happens is we make it easier and easier and easier for the people who need to work the hardest to be able to move up. So It's a sucker's game. It's basically, what can I do to make you happy, to make you satisfied, so you will feel good about yourself and you won't complain or what? Okay? Now, you make $60,000 household income in Keene. Where are you going to buy a house? How can you afford a house in Keene if you're only making $60,000? You could very easily, we saw one, we were talking about $1,400, round up to $1,500 for a studio apartment or a one-bedroom apartment. I saw one right there, $1,600, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. Okay, $1,600. That's $20,000 a year just to rent. Are you going to put money for savings? Or are you going to have good health care? Are you going to be able to save money for college? Are you going to be able to go on vacation? No, you are not. But me, I can say, hey, I'm middle class. I make $180,000. Oh, you know why I say that? It's because I don't have to become across as snobbish. I'm middle class just like you. No, and no. If I'm making 3 times as much as you are, we're not in the same financial area. I don't care whatever a politician tells you. They want to call you middle class because in the good old days, you had the rich, you had the upper class, you had the middle class, you had the working class, and you had the poor. So, that isn't right to call these people rich or upper middle class or middle class or calling these people the working class. Well, if you're slaving in the mills in Manchester 48 hours a week, you're the working class. Okay? Any way you want to put it, you're working class because the working class works their butt off to survive. The middle class, hey, they can be store owners, mom and pop stores, gas station owners and stuff. The upper middle class, doctors, lawyers, dentists, accountants, things like that. The ones who had a nice house, send their kids to college, while the middle class, they can have their house, but it's not going to be a luxury house. You're not going to have 5 rooms and 5 bathrooms. You're not going to have each kid have their own room. Hey, Billy, Johnny, you're going in the same room and you're going on bunk beds. Okay, Mary and Jane, same way. You got 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. That's how they got it. And then mom and dad shared a 3rd room. And where I grew up, there was 1 bathroom. I always get up a half hour earlier than everyone else so I wouldn't get stuck at that time behind my 7 brothers and 1 sister. No, I was getting up early and I was going to the bathroom first. That was the middle class. So, but hey, if I'm a manager at McDonald's, working my butt off 60, 70 hours a week, and you're a dentist, no, We're not in the same financial class. We don't live in the same neighborhood. And there's a good chance we're not going to send our kids to the same schools, because I live in this neighborhood with really good schools. Oh, you live in that neighborhood. Yeah, we got to pay for your kids to go to school. That's the way the game is. Because, hey, if I tell you you're middle class, are you going to work harder? What do you gain by working harder? You're not going to get a different title. You're plain and simple. You're being played as a fool. And they also know, what do you think you have choice? Not choice, or Jennifer Gardner and the black guy Samuel, who would go and, hey, get this card, get double miles, get triple miles, use any aircraft, any airline you want. Okay? Because if you are the $60,000 a year middle class, and I'm the $180,000 a year middle class, I pay cash, or I use my credit card to get those points or the miles, and then I pay it off every month. I have limited credit card debt. I put money in a 529, get a tax break, so when my kids get ready to go to college, they don't have to take out loans. But you go, you know what? This is not a middle class car. So I'm going to go out and pay $40,000 for a class that fits in the middle class. You know, that dentist is sending his kids to karate class. You know what? I'm going to send my kid to karate class. Or you know what? I'm going to pay $2,000 so my kid can be on, say, the Keene Swamp Bat or a traveling team. I want to get my kid a chance. But your kid isn't going to get a chance because it's an arm race. You only have so much money to spend. If you can only buy your daughter 5 hours of training a week, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm not going to let that person down there be better than my daughter, so I'm going to pay for her 10 hours a week training. What do? Hey, no problem. You use the credit card. You use the credit card and high interest loans and stuff to go and show like a peacock that you're middle class too. You've made middle class because look at my car, look at the clothes, look at the iPad or the different electronics I have, which makes me middle class. Again, most of the people are being played as suckers. You know why? Because you're not taught in school. You're not, everybody talk about the American dream. Everybody can make the American dream. Anybody who doesn't accomplish the American dream is lazy, and it's their fault. Let's talk about some honesty in the United States. Look at our industries in the 1800s. You know what they did? They imported groups of people. They sent people over to Europe and China. Let's go to China and import these Chinese people. We'll give them slave laborers. We'll even call this a generous name. We'll call them coolies. A name that's not used anymore and shouldn't be used. And they use these individuals and they work them to death. They put them in the mines. They put them building the railroads. Okay, what did they do? Let's bring the Irish over. You know what? Hey, the Irish are cheaper than slaves, so we can work the Irish's butt off. We can put the Irish people working, building railroads. We can have them build canals. But you'll see the signs on the east. No black, no Irish, no Jews. You'll go out there. No coolies, no Chinese. We took them in. We used and abused them to create income and wealth for a small group of people. You go out to Rocky Mountain National Park. There's a big dam there. And I can't remember right now. There's a plaque there, and it talks about either the Portuguese or the Romanians that did it. Again, that group was brought into the United States, used and abused. But we created wealth. We did the same thing in the Southwest, brought in Mexicans and other ones, used and abused, created wealth, and not paying them very much at all. Then we move up the 1830s, like Lowell, Mass. They've got all these mills. We bring the girls in from Quebec area, the Quebec Province, and we use and abuse those 12, 13, 14-year-old girls, you know, paying them little money at all. The Portuguese in Massachusetts. Then we brought more in from Romania, Russia, and Poland and those, and we put them in sweatshops in New York and all over. Then we brought more and we sent them to Chicago to be in the slaughterhouses. That's a history you're not taught in school, where we import large numbers of immigrants to work at demanding jobs so we can pay them very little and create wealth. And we did not care what happened to these millions and millions of nameless people that a lot of them came here and worked themselves to death. You want to do it? That's one of the reasons President Teddy Roosevelt put in for child labor laws. You know, 6, 7-year-olds working in the coal mines in West Virginia, 6, 7-year-old girls working in Maryland, South Carolina, North Carolina, Louisiana, shucking either crabs or oysters or things like that, skinning fish. No, we became wealthy because we have brought people in and used them and made money for them. You go, no. Okay. You can go check this up. You can go at the Library of Congress. You can look at other places. It's there. The truth is there if you want to seek it. You know, when the Depression was coming on, do you know about 60% of the American people lived at poverty or very near poverty, excuse me, in the United States? 60%. 3 out of 5 people lived in slums, lived in poverty or near, if they didn't live in inner city slums to work in inner city factories to get used and abused. You know, some of them were locked in. Some of them were limited if they could even go for a pee break. Okay? Then were a lot of the rest of them, they were sharecroppers. White sharecroppers, black sharecroppers. And they were stuck in a system. They would barely have enough. They would not make enough. In a lot of cases, they wouldn't make enough money to pay back the company store or pay back the person who owns the land what they had to take out on credit. So they were trapped. And they had no control over what they sold their stuff for. I'm the landowner. I decide what the crop is going to be worth. So just think, inner city slums, sharecroppers, fishermen, slaughterhouse, company stores, mining, you know. But that's not romantic history. We do not want to teach our kids reality. We want to romanticize it where anybody in America can make it to the top as long as they work hard. Do you know? Prior to the GI Bill, okay, 1945, 1 out of every 100 high school graduates went to college. 1 out of every 100. But what the GI Bill did, it changed it from 1 out of 100 to 1 out of every 5. But what happened was, before the GI Bill, you could go to Harvard for $600. So Harvard took some people back who left Harvard to go. The Ivy League schools took them back, paid $650. The federal government did, and then they raised the tuition because the federal government was paying. Okay? That's how it changed. 1 out of 100, 1 out of 5. Then a lot of people, veterans, about 12 million veterans, they could go get GI loans to buy houses. And then they can move out in suburbia. They can have nice planned row houses, all the same. And then that became an advertiser's dream. So if you go back in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, 70s, that's what the advertisers said. We now live in a leave it to Beaver, Father knows best. Well, at best, 2 out of 5 American families fit that category. But if you look at that advertising, leave it to Beaver, Father knows best, Gidget, there were no black people in it. There were no brown people in it. There were no yellow people in it. Because somehow the GI Bill was written is if you had color, you weren't going. So, you know, if you're like my oldest daughter, blonde hair, blue eyes and everything, oh, she can go. She can get a lot of things because she can pass as white. because, you know, we got this one drop rule. You got one drop of black blood, you're white, you're black. So, again, a way to eliminate. Oh, Social Security. Oh, we're going to set up Social Security in a way is, oops, if you have color, you work as a maid or you work as a sharecropper or do this, you don't qualify for Social Security. So all these people, when they came to discussing what the American dream was, leave it to Beaver. Nice husband, wife, dad wears a suit all the time, mom stays home because they got a $9,000 house at a really good rate. Leave it with the GI Bill. Hey, life is good. But life wasn't really so good because, again, what they don't tell you is from 1943 to 1973, there were no competitors for American businesses. When by the time World War II ended, United States had outproduced every single combatant nation combined. Think of that. Japan, Germany, Russia, Great Britain, France, all these countries who fought in Italy, who fought in World War II, when you take all the stuff that they produced, they all produced less than the United States. The amount of shipping that we were putting out, the amount of aircraft, the amount of tanks, the Jeeps, we were unbelievably putting that out. But there was another part of that. Millions of women were now able to work. Millions of women got out of the sweatshops. Millions of women were no longer being abused and underpaid. Oh, yeah, you got to make 14 shirts every hour. You got to do this many collars, this many ribbons. No, the women were building aircraft. The women were building ships, Rosie the River. So these people were getting money. They weren't getting paid as much as their male counterpart. They had to put up with sexual harassment and abuse and everything, but they were making their money. Then it kept on going. Oh, I'm a high school dropout and everything. General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, they were the only game in town. They couldn't, who else was going to produce cars? They needed the United States. So they were all working. But the United States couldn't get enough workers. So the worker says, hey, we want pensions. We want health care. Or we'll go on strike. So they got pensions, they got health care, they got raises. They had money to buy houses. They had money to buy the things that they were producing, cars and stuff, because we were the only game in town. We were even producing stuff to ship over to Germany, ship over to Japan to rebuild their industries, the Marshall Plan. Okay, so we were doing good. But along came 1973. Oh, Germany got on its foot. Germany no longer had to buy everything from the United States. Japan didn't. Japan's crappy transistor radios started getting much better. Japan's crappy cars started getting much better. And so what did they do? They started getting rid of people, started downsizing. And so if you go back and look from 1973 to 2022, you know what? The American worker had been screwed big time. And I'll give you a little numbers. Again, back in 1973, we were still allowed to use poor, working class, middle class, upper middle class, and rich or wealthy. It did not offend enough people for them to complain about it. Okay. In 1973, the mean salary household for 50% above, 50% below for the poor was $2,540. The top of those people, okay, when they looked at all, the top was $4,860. So if you made $4,860, you were just on the cusp of going from poor to working class. The working class made $6,380, almost 2.5 times more than the poor. The top of the working class, $9,020. So if you made $9,021 in 1973, you would have made the middle class. Middle class, $10,470 above and below. To make the top of that, you had to go $13,320. So for $13,321, you would have been part of the upper class. The upper class was $15,000 a year with a high of $19,330. Okay? The wealthy or the rich class, their median was $26,950. So, kind of where it goes, if we just round it up real, the middle class, the working class, made twice as much money as the poor. The middle class made about 80% much more money than the working poor. The upper middle class made 50% more than the middle class, and the wealthy made almost twice as much as the upper middle class. Okay? This should show you how much we have been bamboozled, screwed over, and taken advantage of just because we want to feel good, and we can't use terms like poor, working class, middle class, upper middle class, where we have to use middle class. In most places, the middle is the middle. If you have 5 separate pieces of pie, the middle is the third. 2 from the bottom, 2 from the top. Okay. Now we go to 2022. So let's round it off. 50 years. Okay, 1973, we had overseas competition and things like that. The poor went from $2,500 a year to $16,000 a year. 2022, $16,000 isn't going to get you much. It might not even buy you enough toilet paper. The working poor, or the The working class, they did pretty good. They went from 6,000 to 43,000. But again, 43,000 bucks is not going to get you many places. You know, 43,000 bucks is going to be pretty tough to be able to get an apartment in Keene. You're not buying a house. The middle class, who was $10,000 in 1973, were now $75,000 in 2022 in 50 years. The upper middle class, $15,000 in 1973. Oops. $119,000. A sevenfold increase. $104,000 increase. And the wealthy, to get up in that top 20, which was basically 27,000 in 1973, is now 277,000 in 2022, an increase of $250,000 over 50 years, an increase of like $5,000 a year. So right now, the middle class in the United States, basically 44,000, 120,000. Okay. There is no official standard for what constitutes middle class. It is more about a standard of living, including owning a home, being able to afford to pay for college education for your kids, and have enough disposable income to take a family vacation. And you should add in paying for your retirement, having good health care. So, without a doubt, if you're in the middle class, based on what it should be, you ain't making those standards. You're falling farther and farther behind every paycheck. Every month when inflation goes up, you fall farther and farther behind. And you go, also, what happened after 1973? Oh, the North Carolina sweatshops and mills and stuff like that says, well, you know, nope. We're paying you individuals way too much money. I'm Walmart and I want to be able to sell a bra for $2. And I can't do that if I have American workers. So instead of bringing workers here, we're going to send our company overseas. No United States loyalty. Loyalty is to our stockholders. And so car manufacturing went overseas, medicine manufacturing overseas, medical instruments overseas, you name it. Now we produce all kinds of cattle to send a lot of the meat overseas. We produce drill for oil and things like that. We send more overseas than we drill every day. Hey, the American way. So when I show you that the American people, you know, how much the American, you know, especially the bottom 60 has been screwed over in the last 50 years, while the top got done really well. You know, the stock market. Do you know in 2001, before we had the Bush tax cuts and other tax cuts, the stock market was worth $13.9 trillion. As of January 1st of this year, the stock market was worth $50.8 trillion. So just think. You rounded out an increase of $36 trillion. And then I was noticing our debt over that same time went up $31 trillion. And would you really think and look at it? The top 20% of Americans in the United States own almost 50% of the wealth in the country. Okay? The top 20%, not counting the 1%, own $69+ trillion. And a lot of these people call themselves middle class. The fourth 20%, which used to be called the upper middle class, is $24 trillion. The middle class is $12 trillion. The working class is $7 trillion, and the poor is $5 trillion. Okay? You're going to hear it over and over and over. Okay? The top 1% have more in stock and mutual fund as the rest of the top 20% combined. Okay? The difference in scale continued. The top 20% has more than 10 times as much wealth in stocks and mutual funds as the next 20th. The fourth has 3 times more wealth in stocks and mutual funds. And you know what? The middle class has been working their butts off, and the more they work, the farther and farther they get behind. Because they were never taught 2 rules when it comes to wealth. You don't work to become wealthy. You have other people work to make you wealthy, and you have buy stocks and shares and things like that. So, yeah, you can feel good. You can call yourself middle class. But the top 20 is laughing all the way to the bank because the politicians who are calling you middle class are changing the rules to benefit the top 20. And most of that $30 trillion in deficit has gone to the stock market, has gone to the wealthy, not to the middle class.